I really don't like this idea of like, oh, like millennials won't pay for things. Millennials this, millennials that. Dudes, marketing doesn't change that much. The same direct response ads that went in magazines, you can use that same copy to sell today. Oh baby, this is a spicy meatball. Esports business will charge streamers to watch showdowns with their favorite gamers. What do you mean we'll charge streamers? So first of all, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. I think he means charge viewers to watch showdowns with their favorite gamers by creating premium viewing packages. Much like boxing promotions, charge hefty pay-per-view fees to watch big fights. His esports-only fund, Bitcraft Esports, raised $125 million, according to the SEC. Jesus. Competitive gaming has gone from fringe obsession to booming business per year. That is freaking abysmal. That is abysmal. That's so bad. Riot Games might as well just have all of its employees go out and beg around Santa Monica and they would make more money than that. That's actually crazy. This is 9 times lower than the NFL's yearly revenue per fan. So bad. It's an astoundingly awful number. Hilger says that the fans of traditional sports are used to shelling out for pay-per-view content and premium front row passes, where you can literally smell the blood. You probably spend $40, $50, $60 on an entire weekend of esports tournaments right now. Your average socket ticket probably costs you $100 for just 3 hours of match time. Ultimately, we'll see that coming closer together. They argue the similarities of esports shares with traditional sports don't run deep. Importantly, the audience is largely millennial or younger, and the online entertainment ecosystem that is birthed out that gets by on free, insane content. Yeah, this is actually wrong. So I'm gonna take the hot take here and say that I actually think that this guy Hilgers is absolutely right. A model featuring premium content is super realistic and seems to be the direction the esports should probably go. So my position on this is that the premium model works fine, and you guys are gonna laugh when I tell you what I think the use case for this is with millennials, and even actually the generation before millennials, proving that they will pay for paywall content, is a Logan Paul versus KSI fight. It's generated millions and millions of dollars of revenue under a paywall system for much younger demographics. So it showed that people are willing to pay for content they want to watch behind a paywall, and they're much younger. So that there's this whole idea of like, well, millennials just want like free and instant stuff. No, you don't. Marketing doesn't really change that much. The problem is if you put the current esports, and this is the big one, ready for this? If you put the current esports stuff behind paywalls, no one's going to pay for it because the content is trash. Like, I don't want to watch CLG versus TSM for the 80th time. That's the real problem. What you have to do is you have to put like a show match between like Aframu and Doublelift like getting back together in their bot lane versus like some other iconic like bot lane, and then do like a 1v1 and then put that behind a paywall and make it an hour. That'll sell, right? Like, take the big brands and you create storylines. But if you just take the existing content and toss it behind a paywall, no one's gonna care. The best models here is like MMA is offering great like free content, but the big show fights and like the special events are behind paywalls that everybody will pay for. I've paid for MMA. I really don't like this idea of like, oh, like millennials won't pay for things. Millennials this, millennials that. Dudes, marketing doesn't change that much. The same direct response ads that went in magazines, you can use that same copy to sell today. The psychology of human beings and like the conversations in people's heads that go back and forth, when you're selling something to someone or when you're marketing something to someone, it's a conversation that you're entering into in their head, right? So the idea that like suddenly the generation has changed and like people don't think this, like the same stuff is gonna work. It's just a very like weird idea that like millennials are not willing to pay for things, or millennials just get by on free instant content. Millennials want things now, like things like that. There are some trends that are increasing overall, like for humanity, like we value time, and I would say time as equals convenience more than we value other things now. So for example, like we want our phones to be fast, we want our computers to be fast, we want results to be fast, we want food to be fast, right? Like as far as time, we value that very highly as a society. But when you look at something like paywalls and things like that, as long as the content is good, people will pay for it. And I think the problem is like when this model comes up, it's always badly introduced. So a good example would be like Twitch. Do you guys remember this? You can actually still do this. I was looking through like hundreds of streams the other day for an unannounced project, and I found a bunch of people that actually put their VODs behind subscriber paywalls, right? So I can tell you, knowing Twitch metrics, this doesn't work. This is a very bad idea. It's not because putting your VODs behind subscriber walls is necessarily a bad idea. It's a bad idea because usually your content is not going to be good to justify that price, right? There are exceptions to this rule for certain people, but for almost everybody, it's a bad idea. Almost everybody. So the problem there is not the model, which everybody criticizes. It's the actual content, the content itself. So let me give you a couple of examples of where this works. Some very classic places, Geek and Sundry, right? Geek and Sundry puts their content behind a paywall, and Geek and Sundry is great and very highly demanded. Their content will eventually be on YouTube, right? And you can view it for free. But if you want to view it beforehand, you need to be a subscriber to their channel to access this. And you can see that like a lot of these videos, whenever there's a episode of like that these get a lot of views, right? Some of these have 100K views on these VODs. So people are consuming this content. And that's like pretty great. And if you go back and you look at like, I'm sure the actual episodes of Critical Role, it's probably insane. I haven't even looked at these metrics, but they're probably very high. Like north of 100K pretty easily. So what I'm demonstrating here is that this model works fine. The problem is the content is usually bad. So like if some normal kind of game streamer guy is going to put a paywall up, right? Like, well, maybe people are not going to consume that content, but if you have good content that's highly sought after, then that's a fine thing to do. And there's no real like ethical issue or problem with it because the content that appears for free on YouTube later anyway. Esports is an industry of secondary monetization. The internet at large, people expect everything for free, and that's really hard to get out of their heads. A lot of consumers are also young, hence monetization is low. So everything he just said is wrong. Who is this? An esports firm advising newcomers into the business. Unfortunate. Perhaps your advice should be better. Because everything he said was wrong up till here. A lot of consumers are young, and monetization is low. Even that is a disingenuous statement because monetization is actually quite high for young consumers through their parents. We talked about that in the toys video. Premium content will exist, but it will not move the needle on the radar of what is actually shaping the industry. I don't know what that statement means. We're also talking about regions of the world where money doesn't have the same value as it does to us. If you look at Southeast Asia, $5 a whole week of living. Premium streaming does not work at this time. Dude, who is this guy? Like... has he looked at the statistics for like how much people spend on mobile games in China, for example? This is a completely viable model for those places. Yeah, it's not a completely viable model for the Philippines or something, or like some third world country. Like, okay, fine. Okay. But like for the vast majority of like, yeah, this is Millega. Like for the vast majority of like China and like Japan, like this is an easily monetizable model. Well, if you look at countries where people make $1 a day, they're not going to be able to follow $5 worth of streaming. Like, yeah, that sounds like a good argument I would be making to a zoo animal. But anyone can see through that instantly if you just think about the macroeconomics of it a little bit. Newzoo's recent demographics survey of esports viewers shows that alongside the US, the biggest viewer base for esports exists in China, which is a market that would accept this, Brazil, which is a market that would accept this, India, which is probably not a market that would accept this, and Russia, which is a market that would accept this model. Countries whose populations have paid less for entertainment in the past. Okay. An industry expert at one European consultant who did not want to publicly disagree said the esports audience is so used to getting things for free that there would be so much added value for a large percentage of people to pay a specific amount of money. If only it could be possibly done with the various top stars, this is not a scalable thing. So that's I'd say that's a 50-50 statement. I'd say that's probably right, that it's very hard to scale this. But in the same way, why are we thinking about scaling, right? Like, all these industry buzzwords. This doesn't need to be scaled. The UFC doesn't, quote, scale its fights, right? It just offers a really big fight with McGregor versus whoever, and then everybody watches that. And that's like, you don't need to scale this. It's a multi-million-dollar event if you put it on. It only needs to happen a couple of times a year for people to make a lot of money. Premium model would also go against the grain of a donation-reliant industry without any paywall. Competitive gamers on Twitch are cashing out by building loyal communities of viewers who choose to donate money to their favorite content creators. Non sequitur. That's a completely wrong statement, right? Because the esports industry is not donation-reliant, and the esports industry is not equal to the streamer industry. Riot Games is not collecting donations from its viewers. It's a very disingenuous statement here. Millennial audiences are more skeptical. We've shown again and again that's not true, and they're used to trying things out before they buy. You wouldn't donate to a streamer the first time you watch them? Question mark. I've gotten donations from people all the time, people who watch me for the first time. But if you really like something, you can pay for it, and to me, that feels more organic. Again, this is a sort of false equivalency here, right? The fraction of the industry will be about this premium content model going very marginal. It will exist, but it will not move the needle on what's actually shaping the industry. Considers media licensing deals a more promising revenue stream. Twitch is paying, I agree with that, yeah, is paying $45 million each year to host the Overwatch League. The future looks bright, with Newzoo estimating that esports media rights deals generated about $100 million in revenue. Yeah, media rights deals will always be very big. They're also very big in sports too. Jen Hilgers believes that this premium stream is the next frontier for esports. The reality, a diverse range of esports startups are, with most investments focused in Germany. The premise of this article basically was, how is esports going to monetize going forward? Which is a huge problem, right? How is esports going to monetize going forward? And there's really two ways that this article says they can monetize, and kind of two ways that I agree with, which is, number one, you could do media rights deals, right? So Twitch could buy the rights to broadcast certain content, like Overwatch or League of Legends or something like that, right? And when you look at a lot of the big sports deals, a lot of that is through media rights, right? Like, so where those sports get broadcasted, like those places that are broadcasting those will pay a lot of money to get that content on their platform. And we have been seeing that already in esports. We'll definitely see more of that. I think that'll be one of the main methods of monetization. The controversy in this article comes from the second point, which is that esports needs to be charging for premium content. A lot of people are going to disagree with this on moral, ethical grounds. They're going to say, oh, like, people shouldn't charge for content. Or they're just going to say it doesn't work. Like, this article spends about, I don't know, maybe sort of like 10% of it, basically saying that there's one person, this guy Hilgers, who is a co-founder of ESL, who said that, well, I think that monetization is going to move behind paywalls, just like the UFC, kind of. Because the annual revenue per esports enthusiast, according to this, is $5.49 per year. It's abysmal. You have to improve that. And I completely agree that I totally disagree with these people who are saying millennials are somehow like different and don't respond to this kind of monetization. Again, we've seen that proven wrong. That it does not seem to affect millennials from investing in YouTube, and it does not seem to affect millennials from investing in high quality content on Twitch or on YouTube behind paywalls. And it doesn't seem to stop millennials from investing in one-off events like Logan Paul versus KSI, where we had like a lot of subscribers, a lot of people paid for that, generated millions and millions of dollars of revenue. So it seems reasonable to me that this is a vertical that esports could take advantage of. The problem is that they're going to have to change their content model. I think right now the storylines in esports are bad. They're not interesting. They just seem to be a sort of like regurgitation of the same stuff over and over again, right? CLG versus TSM for the 20th time. TL is 4th place for the 50th time, over and over again. These stories are not interesting. They're kind of dried out and they're kind of boring, not just in the LCS, but also in Overwatch League. I think you're seeing that in the reflection of the viewer statistics. So that needs to be improved. And I think what you could do is you could take storylines out of that. The publishers could take storylines out of these storylines. Like, you could do a one-off event where the example that I used before was like Afromu and Double Lift team up back together in bot lane. They go up against some other iconic duo, or you take like two mid laners and you do some like special challenge. You even like could create like special maps or like a winter theme map or like another mode or something. You could do all kinds of things, because for the amount you're going to get for the paywall, like it's absolutely worth putting a few developers on this to make those improvements, right? But this would require a lot of proactivity from developers, which I don't have faith in from Riot Games, and I definitely don't have faith in from Blizzard. So I think the first step is they will start trying to paywall content as a market test, and that content won't be good, so people won't buy it. And what will probably happen is they'll back off from the model thinking the model doesn't work, when in reality their content was just bad. That is my interpretation of what will probably happen in this in the next 1 to 2 years. Then eventually someone will realize that content, actually good content, people will actually pay for. Again, which has been exemplified by tons of resources like Critical Role and Dan's Gaming and all this stuff, and on Twitch, and then also on YouTube, Logan Paul. And then somebody will come back with good content and they'll realize, oh, hey, this works. And that's basically the storyline of the UFC. So we can kind of expect the same thing to happen in esports. And hey, if you like this video, click the subscribe button below. We'll all see you again next time.